The crystal champagne flute didn't just break, it exploded against the silence of the ballroom. 300 of New York's elite froze, their eyes darting between the trembling woman in the red velvet gown and the smirking matriarch standing at the podium. Elena Vance had opened the envelope, expecting a deed to a vacation home, or perhaps the family heirloom necklace she had been promised for a decade. Instead, she pulled out a thick stack of legal documents stapled in blue backing. The header was unmistakable even from 20 feet away. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Margaret Vance hadn't just ruined Elena's anniversary, she had orchestrated a public execution. But as Elena looked up, wiping a single tear from her cheek, she wasn't thinking about sadness. She was remembering a clause in the prenuptial agreement that Margaret had been too arrogant to read. The war had started, and Margaret had just handed Eleanor the ammunition. The Vance estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, looked less like a home and more like a fortress of old money and new secrets. It was the kind of place where the hedges were trimmed with laser precision and the staff were trained to be invisible. Tonight, the estate was glowing. It was the 10th wedding anniversary of Liam and Elena Vance, a milestone that coincided perfectly and suspiciously with the 40th anniversary of Vance Logistics, the family's shipping empire. Elena stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master suite, smoothing the fabric of her crimson gown. She was 34, sharp-featured, and undeniably beautiful, but the last decade had etched a permanent shadow of exhaustion around her eyes. She wasn't just Liam's wife, she was the CFO of Vance Logistics. She was the one who had steered the company out of the red 5 years ago, when Liam's gambling debts had almost capsized them. She was the one who stayed up until 4 a.m. negotiating with unions in Rotterdam while Liam slept off a hangover. "You're wearing that?" The voice cut through the air like a serrated knife. Elena didn't need to turn around to know that Margaret Vance, her mother-in-law, had entered the room. Margaret was a woman made of hairspray, diamonds, and pure malice. At 68, she still held the title of chairman of the board, though she hadn't made a business decision since the Reagan administration. "It's an anniversary, Margaret," Elena said, keeping her voice even. "Red is for love, passion." "Red is for harlots," Margaret sniffed, walking past Elena to adjust a vase of white lilies, intentionally snapping a stem. "But I suppose it suits you. It's loud, desperate for attention, just like your background." Elena tightened her grip on her clutch. She came from a middle-class family in Ohio, a fact Margaret treated like a criminal record. "Is Liam ready?" "The guests are arriving." "Liam is having a drink in the library. He needs to steel himself," Margaret said, a strange, predatory glint in her eyes. "Tonight is going to be emotional. For everyone." "I assume that means you've prepared one of your speeches," Elena said, turning to face her. Margaret smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the baring of teeth. "Oh, Elena, I've prepared much more than a speech. You've worked so hard for this family. You've sacrificed your youth, your energy, even your desire for children, all for the sake of the business. I think it's time you were finally rewarded exactly as you deserve." There was a heaviness in Margaret's tone that made the hair on Eleanor's arms stand up. Usually, Margaret's insults were petty, complaints about the menu, the flowers, or Elena's perfume. This felt different. This felt final. "I'll see you downstairs," Elena said, brushing past her. As she walked down the grand marble staircase, the noise of the party rose up to meet her. The who's who of the East Coast business world was there. Senators, tech moguls, and the board members of Vance Logistics. Elena spotted Liam near the bar. He looked pale, sweating despite the air conditioning. He was handsome in a weak, soft way, the kind of man who had never been told no and crumbled the moment life required a spine. "Liam?" Elena touched his arm. He flinched, spilling his scotch. "Elena?" he stammered, his eyes refusing to meet hers. "You look... wow. That dress." "Your mother is in a mood," Elena whispered. "Just get through the toasts and we can go to the city for the weekend. Just us." Liam looked at her then, a flash of genuine guilt crossing his face. "Elena, I didn't want to do it this way. You have to know that. She made me." "Made you do what?" Elena frowned. Before Liam could answer, the room went dark. A spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the ballroom. Margaret Vance stood there, looking like a queen addressing her subjects. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret purred into the microphone, "if I could have your attention." The room fell silent. Margaret thrived on this, being the center of the universe. "Tonight we celebrate 10 years of marriage between my son, Liam, and his partner, Elena," Margaret began. The pause before partner was slight, but everyone heard it. Marriage is a business, isn't it? A contract. And like all contracts, sometimes we must review the terms. Elena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She looked at Liam, but he had turned his back, signaling the waiter for another drink. "Elena came to us with nothing," Margaret continued, her voice projecting false sweetness. "And she has worked tirelessly. She learned our ways. She balanced our books. But we all know that blood is thicker than water, and the future of the Vance legacy requires purity." A murmur went through the crowd. This was going off script. "Elena, darling, come up here," Margaret beckoned. The spotlight swung to Elena. Blinded, she hesitated, but the social pressure forced her feet to move. She ascended the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. Margaret held out a large, heavy envelope made of cream linen paper, sealed with the Vance family crest in red wax. "For 10 years you have waited for a seat at the big table," Margaret announced to the room. "You've always asked for equity, for ownership. Well, tonight I am giving you your freedom. This is my gift to you." Eleanor took the envelope. Her hands were shaking. She thought perhaps it was stock options. Perhaps Margaret was finally stepping down and naming her CEO. She broke the wax seal. The crack echoed in the microphone. She pulled out the papers. "Superior Court of Connecticut Plaintiff. Liam Alexander, Vance Defendant. Elena Marie Vance. Nature of action, dissolution of marriage, adultery." The world stopped. The words swam before her eyes. Adultery? She had never looked at another man. She had spent her nights with spreadsheets, not lovers. "Go on, dear," Margaret urged, leaning into the mic. "Read the first page. Tell them what you've won." Elena looked up, her face draining of color. She saw a young woman standing near the front of the crowd. Isabella, Margaret's personal assistant. Isabella was 22, blonde, and wearing a diamond necklace that Elena recognized. It was a necklace Liam had bought 2 months ago, claiming it was an investment piece for the vault. Isabella was smirking. "You're divorcing me," Elena whispered, the microphone catching her trembling voice. "Liam is divorcing you," Margaret corrected loudly, enjoying every second. "On the grounds of your infidelity. We have the photos, Elena. Dr. Robert Holloway. The lunch dates? The late nights." Elena's jaw dropped. Robert Holloway was their corporate oncologist. She had been meeting him because she was organizing a charity drive for cancer research, a drive Margaret had insisted on. "That's a lie," Elena said, her voice gaining strength. "Those were business meetings." "The court won't see it that way," Margaret hissed, covering the mic with her hand for a split second. "The prenup is clear, Elena. If you cheat, you get nothing. No alimony, no stocks. You leave with what you came with, which is zero. Margaret pulled her hand back and addressed the crowd. Let's raise a glass to the new chapter of Vance Logistics, to Liam and to the future. The crowd was stunned. No one clapped. The cruelty was too raw, too public. Elena looked at Liam. He was finally looking at her, his eyes wet with tears, mouthing, "I'm sorry." But he didn't step forward. He stayed in the shadows. Elena looked down at the papers. Humiliation burned her skin like fire. She felt the eyes of 300 people judging her, pitying her. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But then her eyes caught a detail on the 3rd page of the filing. It was the list of assets Liam was claiming as sole property. Vance Logistics Holdings, the Greenwich estate, the patent for the automated shipping algorithm. A cold, hard clarity washed over Eleanor. The trembling in her hands stopped. She slowly folded the papers and placed them back in the envelope. She looked at Margaret, who was beaming with triumph. Eleanor stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you, Margaret," Elena said. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. "This is truly a gift I didn't expect. You are right. Contracts should be reviewed." She leaned in closer to her mother-in-law. "But you really should have checked who actually owns the patent for the shipping algorithm before you tried to steal it." She dropped the mic. It wasn't a figure of speech. She let the heavy metal device thud onto the stage floor, creating a feedback screech that forced everyone to cover their ears. Elena walked off the stage, head high, the red dress trailing behind her like blood in the water. She didn't look at Liam. She walked straight out the front door into the night. Elena didn't drive to her sister's house to cry. She didn't check into a hotel to wallow. She drove her Audi RS7 straight to a nondescript office building in downtown Stamford. It was 11:00 p.m. She used her keycard to enter the 14th floor. The sign on the glass door read, "Sterling and Associates, Forensic Accounting and Legal Strategy." She flipped on the lights. The office was small, cluttered with whiteboards and boxes. A man was asleep on the leather sofa in the corner. "Wake up, Arthur," Elena said, tossing the divorce papers onto his chest. Arthur Pendleton groaned and sat up, adjusting his glasses. He was 60, disheveled, and the most brilliant contract lawyer in the tri-state area. He was also the only person Elena trusted. He had been her father's friend before her father passed away, broke, ruined by a company very much like Vance Logistics. "What time is it?" Arthur squinted. He saw the red dress. "You look like you just killed someone." "Not yet," Elena said, kicking off her heels and pacing the room. Margaret pulled the trigger. "She served me divorce papers at the gala. Publicly. Accused me of cheating with Dr. Halloway to void the prenup." Arthur let out a low whistle. "Old school. Nasty. But hard to prove." "It doesn't matter if it's true," Elena said. "She wants to tie me up in court for years while they drain the accounts. She wants me to settle for pennies just to make it stop. She thinks I'm the same naive girl from Ohio she bullied 10 years ago." Arthur picked up the papers. "So what do you want to do?" "We can fight the infidelity claim. Get phone records, affidavits from Halloway." "No." Elena stopped pacing. She walked over to the safe, hidden behind a framed map of the world. She spun the dial, 042289, and pulled out a single, leather-bound folder. "I don't want to defend myself, Arthur. I want to burn them to the ground." She slammed the folder on the desk. "Margaret thinks Vance Logistics runs on Liam's family name," Elena said, her eyes blazing. "But 5 years ago, when the company was bankrupt, I created the Vance Flow software, the automated routing system that saved the company millions, the system that just got them a government defense contract worth $2 billion. Right, Arthur nodded. The IP is the company's most valuable asset. When I wrote the code, Elena said, opening the folder, Margaret was too busy vacationing in Saint-Tropez to attend the board meetings. Liam was in rehab. They needed my signature to secure the bank loan. They were desperate. She pointed to a document with a yellow sticky note. I didn't sign the IP over to Vance Logistics, Arthur. I assigned it to a holding company called Phoenix Tech. Arthur leaned in, reading the fine print. His eyes widened. And who owns Phoenix Tech? Elena smiled. It was the first time she had smiled all night. I do. 100%. Arthur started to laugh. It was a dry, raspy chuckle that grew into a full belly laugh. Does Margaret know? No. She assumes it's a subsidiary of Vance. She never checks the paperwork. She just signs where I tell her to. Elena poured herself a glass of cheap office whiskey. If Liam divorces me, I'm no longer family. If I'm no longer family, the family discount for the software license expires. And what is the non-family rate? Arthur asked, pulling out a legal pad. $10 million a day, Elena said. Or immediate cessation of use, which would freeze their entire global shipping fleet instantly. Arthur clicked his pen. So, when do we tell them? Not yet, Elena said, taking a sip of the whiskey. In 3 days there is a shareholder meeting. They are planning to announce the new government contract. They need the software running perfectly to close the deal. You're going to crash the meeting, Arthur surmised. I'm not just going to crash it, Elena said, staring at her reflection in the dark window. I'm going to repossess my company. But just then, Elena's phone buzzed. It was a text message from Liam. Don't do anything stupid, Elle. Mum has lawyers you don't know about. If you fight this, she's going to release the video. Elena frowned. Video? What video? She typed back. What are you talking about? A moment later, a video file loaded. Elena pressed play. The color drained from her face faster than it had at the party. It was a grainy security camera footage from a hotel hallway. It showed a woman who looked exactly like Elena, wearing Elena's coat, walking into a room with Dr. Halloway. Deepfake, Arthur said, looking over her shoulder. High quality, too. It doesn't matter if it's fake, Elena whispered. If she leaks this to the press before the shareholder meeting, the board will vote to strip me of any executive power due to a morality clause before I can even play my hand. They'll destroy my reputation. No one will believe me. Margaret was steps ahead. She wasn't just relying on the divorce. She was manufacturing evidence to make sure Elena was unhireable anywhere else. Elena looked at Arthur. She wants a war. Fine. Elena grabbed a marker and walked to the whiteboard. She wrote one name at the top. Sophia Dubois. Who is that? Arthur asked. Margaret's old accountant, the one she fired 3 years ago for embezzlement and threatened to jail if she ever spoke up, Elena said. Margaret has skeletons, Arthur. Real ones, not deep fakes. If we can find Sophia, we can find where Margaret hid the money she stole from the employee pension fund in the 90s. Sophia disappeared, Arthur warned. People looked for her. They didn't look hard enough, Elena said. I need a private investigator, the best one, tonight. Arthur picked up his landline. I know a guy. He's expensive, and he doesn't like questions. Call him, Elena said. I have a shareholder meeting to crash in 72 hours. I need to be ready to burn the whole kingdom down. The rain in Queens didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. At 2:30 a.m., Eleanor sat in the passenger seat of a rusted Ford sedan, watching the entrance of a 24-hour laundromat on 31st Avenue. Beside her sat Jack Silas, the private investigator Arthur had called. Silas looked like a man made of rough leather and cigarette smoke. He didn't ask why a woman in a couture red gown was sitting in his car. He just watched the door. "You sure this is her?" Elena asked, shivering slightly. The adrenaline from the party was fading, replaced by the bone-deep chill of exhaustion. Sophia Dubois. Changed her name to Sarah Miller. Works the graveyard shift folding sheets for the local hotels. Lives in a basement studio 3 blocks over, Silas recited from his notepad. She's a ghost, Mrs. Vance. No credit cards, no social media, rent paid in cash. Someone terrified her into disappearing. "Margaret," Elena said, the name tasting like ash. "She's thorough." "There she is," Silas pointed. A woman walked out of the laundromat carrying a plastic bag. She looked older than Elena remembered. Grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, shoulders slumped under the weight of an invisible burden. Sophia Dubois used to wear Chanel suits and manage the finances of a billion-dollar empire. Now, she wore a stained grey hoodie and looked at every passing car with suspicion. Elena opened the door. "Wait," Silas warned. "If she sees you, she might run. She thinks you're one of them." "I was one of them," Elena said, stepping into the rain. "That's why she'll listen." Elena crossed the street. "Sophia?" The woman froze. She didn't turn around. She dropped the plastic bag. "I don't have anything left," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Tell Margaret I don't have anything left." "I'm not here for Margaret," Elena said softly. She walked around to face her. Sophia's eyes widened as she took in Elena's face. "Elena? My God. What happened to you?" "Margaret happened," Elena said. "She served me divorce papers tonight. She's trying to destroy me, Sophia, just like she destroyed you." Sophia let out a bitter, jagged laugh. She looked around nervously. "You shouldn't be here. They watch. They always watch." "Who watches?" "Her security team. The fixers," Sophia hissed, grabbing Elena's arm and pulling her into the shadows of an awning. "You think Margaret just fired me? She told me she'd plant cocaine in my son's college dorm room if I ever spoke about the pension fund. She showed me the baggie, Elena. She had it ready." Elena felt a surge of nausea. She knew Margaret was cutthroat, but this was mafia-level coercion. "My son graduates next month," Sophia said, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I just need to stay quiet for 1 more month. Please, Elena, go away." "She's not going to stop, Sophia," Elena pressed. "She destroys people because she enjoys it. Tonight, she accused me of adultery. Tomorrow, she's going to release a fake video to ruin my career. I have nothing left to lose. But I have the power to stop her. Permanently." Sophia shook her head. "You can't. She owns the board. She owns the judges. She doesn't own the software," Elena said. Sophia paused. As the former accountant, she understood the value of assets. "I own Phoenix Tech," Elena whispered. "The algorithm that runs the ships, it's mine. I'm pulling the license in 48 hours, but that just bankrupts the company. It doesn't put Margaret in jail. I need the pension records, Sophia. I need to prove she stole the employee retirement money to pay off Liam's first gambling debts 10 years ago." Sophia looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, for the first time. She saw the fire in the younger woman's eyes. It was the same fire Sophia used to have before fear extinguished it. "I didn't keep the files," Sophia said. Eleanor's heart sank. "But," Sophia continued, "I kept the backup server logs on a mirrored hard drive. I buried it." "Where?" "Literally buried it," Sophia said. "In my mother's grave in Jersey City. It was the only place I knew Margaret wouldn't look." Eleanor stared at her. "We need to go. Now." Just then, Eleanor's phone vibrated violently in her clutch. Then it vibrated again, and again. a constant, buzzing stream. She pulled it out. Her screen was flooded with notifications. Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. New trending topic. Lena Vance scandal. She opened a news alert. The headline screamed in bold black letters. Vance Logistics CFO caught in hotel tryst. Explicit video leaked. Elena tapped the link. The video player loaded. It was the deep fake, the grainy footage of her and Dr. Holloway entering the hotel room, followed by audio, clearly spliced and fabricated, of moans and whispered betrayals. It had been uploaded 20 minutes ago. It already had 2 million views. "Oh no," Sophia whispered, looking at the screen. "She did it." Elena felt the ground sway beneath her. Her reputation, carefully built over a decade of 80-hour work weeks, was evaporating in real time. The board members wouldn't wait for a trial. They would vote to remove her for moral turpitude, first thing in the morning. She would be locked out of the building before the shareholder meeting even started. She moved up the timeline, Elena said, her voice hollow. "She wants you to break," Silas said, stepping up behind them. "She wants you to hide." Elena looked at the phone, then at Sophia, then at the rain-slicked street. The old Elena would have issued a press release denying it. The old Elena would have called Liam, begging him to tell the truth. The new Elena threw the phone into a puddle. "Let them watch the video," Elena said, her voice turning to steel. "Let them think I'm finished. It will make them careless." She turned to Sophia. "Get in the car. We're going to the cemetery." The mood inside the Vance estate the next morning was jubilant, almost hysterical. It felt less like a home and more like a war room after a decisive victory. Margaret Vance sat at the head of the mahogany breakfast table, scrolling through comments on her iPad with a manicured finger. "Listen to this one," she chuckled, sipping her herbal tea. "I always knew she looked too ambitious. Gold digger exposed. Oh, the public is so delightfully predictable. Give them a villain, and they will tear her apart for you." Liam sat opposite her, pushing a fork around a plate of untouched eggs. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands had a slight tremor. "Was it necessary to include the audio?" Liam asked quietly. It sounds like her. It's disturbing, Mother." "Don't be soft, Liam," Margaret snapped, not looking up. "We are in a fight for the company's survival. Elena was going to demand half. Do you want to give her half of your inheritance? Half of my legacy? Because you couldn't keep your pants on in Vegas 5 years ago." Liam flinched. The gambling debts. The blackmail. Margaret never let him forget that she had cleaned up his messes. He was the CEO in title, but he was a hostage in practice. "I just think maybe she would have settled," Liam murmured. "She is a viper," Margaret said. "And we have cut off her head. The board has already emailed me. They are convening an emergency vote via Zoom at noon to terminate her employment. By the time the shareholders meet tomorrow to announce the government contract, Elena will be nothing more than a bad memory." The double doors to the dining room burst open. It was Marcus, the director of IT. He was a sweaty, frantic man who usually terrified of entering the main house. Today, he didn't even knock. "Mrs. Vance, Liam, we have a problem." Margaret sighed, setting down her tea. "Marcus, unless the building is on fire, do not interrupt my breakfast." "The system," Marcus panted, holding up a laptop. "The VanceFlow dashboard. It's counting down." "What are you talking about?" Liam asked, standing up. Marcus set the laptop on the table. On the screen, where the global logistics map usually showed the real-time location of their 400 cargo ships, there was a giant black box with red digital numbers. "License expiration. Warning time remaining. 23:59 and 59. Renewal required by administrator. Phoenix Tech. What is this? Margaret demanded, squinting at the screen. Is it a virus? No, ma'am, Marcus said, wiping sweat from his forehead. It's a license key request. I tried to bypass it. I tried to restore the system from backup. But the core code, it's not ours. Of course it's ours, Margaret yelled. We paid for the development. I checked the metadata, Marcus said, his voice trembling. The software is leased. The license holder is a third-party entity called Phoenix Tech. They sent a ping to the server at 8 Exporn. If we don't input the renewal key in 24 hours, exactly when the shareholder meeting starts, the ships stop. Stop? Liam asked. What do you mean, stop? I mean the automated routing goes offline, the manifests lock. The cranes at the ports won't receive the digital handshakes to unload the cargo. We have perishable goods worth $300 million on the water right now. If those ships sit in the harbor for 2 days, the cargo spoils. We'll be liable for billions. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Phoenix Tech, Margaret whispered. She looked at Liam. Who owns Phoenix Tech? Liam shook his head. I've never heard of it. I thought it was a shell company you set up for tax purposes. I didn't set it up, Margaret screeched. She stood up, knocking her chair over. Eleanor. The realization hit them both at the same time. She wrote the code, Liam said, his face paling. She handled the integration. She made us sign all those stacks of documents during the restructuring. Margaret grabbed the laptop and stared at the red numbers. 23 Maarti Tahat? 10. She's holding the company hostage, Margaret hissed. A vein throbbed in her forehead. She knew we were going to move on her, and she planted a bomb. We have to call her, Liam said, reaching for his phone. We have to fix this. Put the phone away, Margaret ordered. If you call her now, she wins. She'll demand everything. She'll want the estate. She'll want the chairmanship. Mother, if the ships stop during the shareholder meeting with the Defense Department watching, we are finished. We go to prison for breach of contract, Liam shouted, finding his voice for the first time in years. Margaret paced the room, her silk robe flowing behind her like a cape. She wasn't scared. She was furious. She was a cornered animal, and that made her dangerous. She thinks she's smart, Margaret muttered, but she's overlooking one thing. She is currently a disgraced employee. If she is unavailable to renew the license, we can petition the court for emergency access to her digital assets. Liam looked at his mother with horror. Unavailable? What do you mean? Margaret turned to Marcus. Get out! Fix it, or you're fired. Marcus ran out of the room. Margaret turned to Liam. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any maternal warmth. We need to find her, Margaret said calmly. The video drove her into hiding. Good. But we need to find exactly where she is. And we need to make sure that when the police find her, they find more than just divorce papers. Mother, Liam stepped back. You're talking about framing her. For what? Corporate espionage, embezzlement, drugs, it doesn't matter, Margaret said, walking to the wall phone. I'm calling the head of security. We are going to track her car. When we find her, we will take her laptop, and we will get that key. This is madness, Liam said. We should just negotiate. Margaret stopped dialing. She looked at her son with pure disgust. You are weak, Liam. That is why your wife walked all over you. That is why I have to do this. Do you think the Vanderbilts or the Rockefellers got where they were by negotiating with the help? She dialed the number. Find Elena Vance, she commanded into the receiver. Ping her car's GPS. I don't care if she disabled the phone. The car has a tracker. Find her and bring the containment kit. Liam stood frozen in the dining room. He knew what the containment kit was. It was a term from the old days. Bribes, planted evidence, physical intimidation. He looked at the iPad on the table. The deepfake video was playing on a loop. He saw the digital version of his wife, a woman he had once loved, being humiliated by his own mother. And now he knew his mother was planning to physically hunt her down. Liam felt a vibration in his pocket. It was his burner phone, the one Margaret didn't monitor. He pulled it out under the table. A text message. Unknown number. I know about Phoenix Tech, and I know about the pension fund. If you want to stay out of jail, you have one chance. Meet me at the grandiose ruin. Tonight. Midnight. Alone. Liam stared at the screen. The grandiose ruin. He knew exactly where that was. It was the old, abandoned Vance shipyard, where he and Eleanor had their first date, sneaking in to watch the sunset on the rusted cranes. He looked at his mother, who was barking orders about tracking dogs and private security contractors. Liam Vance had been a coward his whole life, but as he looked at the ticking clock on the laptop screen, he realized that if he did nothing, the explosion wouldn't just kill Elena, it would kill him too. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked out of the room. "Where are you going?" Margaret snapped. "To get a drink," Liam lied. "If we're going to war, I need a stiff one." He walked out, but he didn't head to the bar. He headed to the garage. The grandiose ruin was the local nickname for Dry Dock 4, a skeletal remnant of the shipyard's golden age that sat on the edge of the Hudson River. It was a cathedral of rusted iron and broken glass, looming against the midnight sky like the ribcage of a leviathan. Elena parked her car a mile away, hidden under an overpass, and walked the rest of the distance. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, soaking her through her trench coat. Beside her, Sophia clutched a waterproof Pelican case to her chest as if it contained a human heart. Inside that case was the hard drive they had just dug out of the earth in Jersey City, the digital smoking gun that proved 20 years of fraud. "You stay here," Elena whispered, pushing Sophia behind a stack of rotting shipping containers near the entrance. "If I'm not back in 15 minutes, you call Arthur, and then you run." "Elena, he's one of them," Sophia warned, her teeth chattering. "Liam is her blood." "I know," Elena said, checking the small can of pepper spray in her pocket, a pitiful weapon against what Margaret might have sent. "But he's the only way I get into that building tomorrow. My credentials are revoked. Security will tackle me on sight. I need his pass." Elena walked into the open dry dock. The wind howled through the metal girders. In the center of the vast, empty concrete slab, a solitary figure stood under a black umbrella. Liam. He looked smaller than she remembered. The arrogance of the gala was gone, replaced by the slumped posture of a man who had realized he was the villain in his own life story. Elena stopped 10 feet away. "I'm here." Liam looked up. His face was bruised, a fresh, purple welt on his cheekbone. "She hit you?" Elena asked, surprised by the surge of anger she felt. Not for him, but at Margaret. "She wears heavy rings," Liam said with a humorless laugh. He touched his cheek. "I tried to tell her to stop the hunt. She didn't take it well." "Where are they, Liam?" Elena scanned the shadows. "The security team? The police?" "I sent them to the wrong location," Liam said. "I told them the tracker pinged in heavy traffic on the I-95, heading to Boston. They're chasing a ghost. You have about an hour before they realize I lied." Elena studied him. "Why?" "Because I watched the video," Liam said, his voice breaking. "The deepfake. I watched it 5 times, and then I remembered the real video, the one from our honeymoon, the way you looked at me when we were in Venice, and I realized, I've let her turn me into a monster." He reached into his pocket. Elena flinched, stepping back. Liam froze, seeing her fear. A look of profound shame crossed his face. He slowly pulled out a lanyard. Hanging from it was a platinum keycard. "This is the CEO override pass," Liam said, tossing it onto the wet concrete between them. "It bypasses the biometric scanners. It opens the executive elevator. It gets you into the boardroom." Elena looked at the pass, then back at him. "If I take this, and I do what I'm going to do, there is no coming back, Liam. The company will be gutted. Your inheritance will be gone." "It was never mine," Liam said, looking at the rusting cranes above them. "It was always hers. I was just another asset she managed. Like the ships. Like you." He looked her in the eye. "Destroy her, Eleanor. Burn it all down. It's the only way any of us will ever be free." Suddenly, headlights swept across the dry dock walls. Tires screeched on the gravel outside. "They found us!" Liam panicked. "She must have tracked my burner phone. Go!" "Liam! Go!" he screamed, turning toward the approaching lights. Elena grabbed the pass from the wet ground and sprinted back toward the shipping containers. She grabbed Sophia, and they vanished into the maze of rusted metal just as two black SUVs roared into the center of the dry dock. From the shadows, Elena watched as 4 men in tactical gear jumped out. Margaret Vance stepped out of the rear vehicle, protected by an umbrella held by a bodyguard. She walked up to Liam. She didn't yell. She simply slapped him, harder this time. "Where is she?" Margaret's voice carried over the wind. "Gone," Liam said, standing tall for the first time in his life. "And she has the pass." Margaret signaled the men. "Find her. Sweep the perimeter. If she resists, use force." Elena and Sophia were already moving, slipping through a hole in the chain-link fence, disappearing into the night. They had the evidence. They had the key. And the clock was ticking down to 8 a.m. The silence on the 50th floor of the Vance Logistics Tower wasn't peaceful. It was pressurized. It was the kind of silence that precedes a hull breach in a submarine. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, the New York skyline gleamed in the morning light, but no one was looking at the view. Their eyes were fixed on the harbor below, where 20 massive container ships sat motionless in the water, drifting slightly against the tide like dead whales. Inside the boardroom, the air conditioning hummed aggressively, battling the rising body heat of the 20 people seated around the obsidian table. It was 8:55 a.m. The countdown to the shareholders' meeting and the expiration of the software license had entered its final, critical minutes. Margaret Vance stood at the head of the table. She had spent an hour in makeup trying to cover the dark circles under her eyes, but the foundation was starting to crease under the stress. She wore a navy Chanel suit that usually acted as armor, but today it felt restrictive, like a cage. To her right sat the board of directors, 6 old men who had grown rich on dividends and lazy on oversight. They shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, checking their watches. To her left sat General Marcus Halloway, no relation to the doctor, and his entourage from the Department of Defense. The general was a man carved from granite, and he was currently staring at a blank projector screen with the patience of a ticking bomb. "Mrs. Vance!" the general rumbled, his voice vibrating through the mahogany. "My team in Logistics Command is reporting a total standstill of your Atlantic fleet. We are 5 minutes away from signing a $2 billion government contract. I need to know why your ships aren't moving." Margaret forced a smile. It was a terrifying grimace. "General, as I mentioned, we are undergoing a scheduled server migration. It's a security protocol to ensure the utmost safety for your cargo. The system is simply rebooting." She shot a look at Marcus, the IT director, who was hunched over a laptop in the corner. He looked like he was about to vomit. He held up 5 shaking fingers. 5 minutes until total system lockout. A reboot, the general repeated skeptically. During our acquisition meeting. Precision timing is our specialty, Margaret lied, sweating. Trust the process. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from her head of security, a man named Voronov who was usually efficient and brutal. Text. The perimeter is clear. No sign of the target. We have the lobby elevators locked down. She can't get up. Margaret exhaled, a tiny puff of relief escaping her lips. If Eleanor couldn't get into the room, she couldn't stop the vote. Margaret would stall the general, force the IT team to crack the code later, by force if necessary, and spin a story about a Russian cyber attack to explain the delay. She just needed the signature. "Shall we proceed to the financials?" Margaret said, grabbing the remote control for the projector. "I think you'll find our quarterly projections quite robust." She pressed the button. The screen behind her flickered to life. The hum of the projector fan grew louder. But the image that appeared wasn't a bar graph of rising profits. It wasn't a pie chart of market dominance. It was a bank statement. A high-resolution scan of a private ledger from the First National Bank of the Cayman Islands. The room went deadly quiet. The header on the document was unmistakable. Account holder, Margaret Vance. Beneficiary, Vance Family Trust. Highlighted in neon yellow was a transaction dated 10 years prior, 45,000 sesterces. The source of the funds was listed clearly, Vance Logistics Employee Pension Fund. "What on earth is this?" one of the board members gasped, cleaning his glasses. Margaret whipped around to look at the screen. The blood drained from her face so fast she nearly fainted. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Marcus, cut the feed!" "I can't!" Marcus yelled back, typing frantically, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm locked out! Someone has admin access from a remote terminal. They've hijacked the presentation layer." "Remote terminal?" Margaret hissed. "Who?" The answer came not from the screen, but from the back of the room. The heavy double doors of the boardroom, which were reinforced with steel and required a level 5 biometric scan to open, clicked loudly. The magnetic locks disengaged with a heavy thud. The doors swung open. Elena Vance stepped inside. She wasn't wearing the red dress of the victim. She was wearing a white suit, tailored to perfection, sharp enough to cut glass. It was the color of mourning in some cultures, but today it looked like the color of a purifying fire. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, revealing a face that held no fear, only cold, hard determination. Behind her walked Arthur Pendleton, clutching a battered leather briefcase, and Sophia Dubois. Sophia, the exiled accountant who had been living in fear for 3 years, looked terrified. She clutched Eleanor's jacket sleeve, but she kept walking. "Good morning, gentlemen," Eleanor said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried perfectly in the acoustic dead zone of the boardroom. "Eleanor!" Margaret shouted, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "Security! Get them out of here! These people are trespassing!" 2 large guards in the corner stepped forward, hands reaching for their tasers. "Stand down!" General Holloway barked. He stood up, imposing and furious. "I want to hear this." The guards froze. The general looked at Elena. "Who are you?" "I am the chief financial officer of this company, General. Or I was, until yesterday," Elena said, walking calmly toward the head of the table. The board members parted like the Red Sea, terrified of her energy. "And more importantly, I am the sole owner of Phoenix Tech, the entity that owns the navigation software you are planning to use for your military supply chain." She pointed a remote at the screen. The bank statement vanished, replaced by a live view of the system back-end. A giant digital countdown clock dominated the wall. 0, 01, 30. Status: critical. License revoked. "What have you done?" Margaret screamed. She lunged toward Eleanor, but Arthur stepped in between them, blocking her path. "You vindictive little witch! You're sabotaging the company because you're bitter about the divorce." "I simply declined to renew a contract with a business partner who committed felony fraud," Elena replied, her voice smooth as ice. She turned to the board, making eye contact with every single man who had ignored her for a decade. "The document you just saw was provided by Sophia Dubois. You remember Sophia? The head of accounting Margaret, fired 3 years ago for embezzlement." The truth is, Sophia discovered that Margaret emptied the employee pension fund to pay off Liam's gambling debts and secure the initial loans for the fleet expansion. She stole $45 million from the people who scrub the decks and drive the trucks. "Lies!" Margaret shouted, her eyes wild. She looked like a cornered animal. "She's a disgruntled employee, a liar, and you are an adulterer. We have it on video. The morals clause in your contract voids everything you say." "Ah, yes, the video," Elena nodded. "Arthur?" Arthur placed his briefcase on the table and plugged a USB drive into the main console. "We ran the hotel video through a forensic analysis suite last night," Arthur announced. His voice was gravelly, the voice of a lawyer who had seen everything. "The metadata confirms it was generated using a deepfake algorithm. It's a digital puppet show. But that's not the interesting part." Arthur hit a key. A map appeared on the screen. A red line traced the digital footprint of the upload. It bounced from a server in Russia to a VPN in Switzerland, and finally resolved to a single physical location. Upload source: 12 Vance Estate Drive, master bedroom, iPad device number 4. "You uploaded it, Margaret," Elena said softly. "We have the timestamp, 7:40 a.m., while you were drinking your herbal tea." The room was so silent you could hear the wind hitting the glass outside. The board members stared at Margaret with open horror. This wasn't just a scandal. This was a federal crime. General Holloway began packing his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like gunshots. "Mrs. Vance," the general said, his voice dripping with disgust. "The Department of Defense does not do business with felons, and we certainly don't trust our logistics to a family that fabricates blackmail." "General, please!" Margaret stammered, reaching out to grab his arm. He pulled away as if she were contagious. "These are fabrications, industrial espionage. I can explain." "The deal is off," Holloway said. He looked at Elena with a nod of respect, then marched his team out of the room. "No!" Margaret screamed, watching $2 billion walk out the door. She whirled on Eleanor. "Fix this. Turn the ships back on. You're killing the legacy. You're killing us." "The legacy is already dead, Margaret," Eleanor said. "You killed it when you decided you were above the law." Elena pulled out her phone and pressed a single button. "Send them in." Margaret looked at the door, her eyes desperate, expecting Liam to run in and save her. Instead, the doors opened again. 6 agents wearing navy blue FBI windbreakers entered the room, guns holstered, but hands on their badges. "Margaret Vance," the lead agent announced, holding up a warrant. "We have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, RICO violations, and corporate malfeasance." Margaret stumbled back, hitting the glass wall. She looked small now, stripped of her power, stripped of her lies. "No, I am Margaret Vance. I built this city. You can't touch me." As the agents moved in and handcuffed her, snapping the metal cuffs tight, she looked wildly around the room for an ally. She saw Liam standing in the doorway. He had evidently followed Eleanor up, watching the entire scene from the shadows. "Liam!" Margaret cried out, tears finally streaming down her face. Tell them who I am. Do something." Liam looked at his mother. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the years of manipulation, the gambling debt she held over him, the cruelty she had inflicted on his wife. Then he looked at Elena. He saw the strength in her, the strength he never had. "I have nothing to say," Liam said quietly. "Liam!" she shrieked as they dragged her past him. "Goodbye, Mother," he whispered. He turned his back on her and walked away, disappearing down the hall without looking back. As the sounds of Margaret's screaming faded into the elevator bank, the boardroom fell into a stunned, heavy silence. The remaining board members looked at Eleanor. They looked at the red countdown clock. 10. "Mrs. Vance," the chairman of the board stammered, his face pale. "If you turn the software back on, maybe we can salvage the commercial contracts. We can name you CEO. We can give you the majority shares. We can give you whatever you want. Just stop the clock." Elena looked at the screen. She looked at the empire she had spent 10 years building. She looked at the men who had let Margaret abuse her for a decade. "I don't want the job," Elena said, "and I don't want the shares." She stepped up to the keyboard. The cursor blinked on the command line. "System delete. Confirm?" "You can't," the chairman whispered. "It's worth billions." "It's worth nothing if the foundation is rotten," Elena said. She pressed enter. The sound of the key clicking was the loudest thing in the world. On the screen, the map of the world dissolved. The lines of code cascaded down like green rain, then vanished. The dashboard went black. System purged. "I'm taking my IP," Elena said, picking up her bag. "And I'm going to start my own company, one that pays its pensions." She turned to her team. "Sophia, Arthur, let's go get lunch. I'm starving." Elena Vance didn't look back at the stunned men in their expensive suits. She walked out of the glass tower, took the elevator down to the lobby, and stepped out into the bright, blinding morning sun. She didn't have a husband. She didn't have a job. She didn't have a title. But for the first time in 10 years, the air tasted sweet. She was free. And that is how Elena Vance didn't just win the divorce, she repossessed the entire chessboard. Margaret Vance is currently serving a 15-year sentence in a federal prison, and rumor has it she still blames everyone but herself. Liam moved to a small town in Vermont and opened a bookstore, finally free of his mother's shadow, though he never spoke to Eleanor again. As for Eleanor, she launched Phoenix Logistics a year later. It's now the biggest shipping firm on the East Coast, and yes, Sophia is the CFO. If you enjoyed this story of supreme revenge, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Elena? Would you have saved the company or burned it down? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new story.